Today I'm here with Jean Eng. It's my honor to be with you today, Jean. Jean has an extensive science background, a PhD in neurobiology, a postdoctoral fellowship, and was led into healing in 2003 when he experienced an opening. So we're going to start with that. So what was the shift where you went from kind of mainstream science into this opening where you are practicing this incredible energy medicine?
Mm-hmm. And thank you for inviting me to speak here. And I'm glad I could share this with the viewers. So I was doing pretty extensive research for probably 9 years before that opening occurred. And I had just finished my PhD at Yale, so that took 5 years. From that point, though, I started to get this sense that I wanted to help on a larger scale, sort of directly with people. And so that was the intention for going into research. But usually that's more a solo, it's a very noble path, but you're doing things sort of on your own in the lab. And so I did finish a postdoctoral fellowship, but during that, at Yale at the same time. But at the same time, I was studying with healers. And that's really what began the kind of opening, is studying with those different energy healers.
Was there a spiritual belief or practice you had prior to that, or was this just kind of an awakening?
Mm-hmm. No, probably for the past 15 years or so prior to that, I had kind of gone on an inner path, and the tool or the opening for that was through a book called The Course in Miracles.
Right.
So that's fairly well known in the spiritual circles, in the United States and also internationally.
Yeah. Now, what I love about you, though, what I love about Jean is you're very grounded, you're scientifically based, and you're doing this energy work. You do sessions with the reconnection, with chronic healing, and your own version, which I experienced yesterday, of Arcturian healing.
Mm-hmm.
Can we first of all start to talk about energy and frequency and how you feel about that and how it helps to shift people and experiences?
Right. Yes, it's definitely a different paradigm than the current Western scientific model.
Thank God.
And basically that paradigm states, it's called scientific materialism, that's the kind of formal term, that what's real is in the physical world or physical dimensions, what we can sense with our 5 physical senses. And all these different energy modalities or healing modalities or spiritual healing, they come from a different paradigm, and that's really what the bridge is that's occurring now. And that paradigm suggests that the physical world is a real dimension in those other paradigms, but there are other non-physical dimensions that have just as much validity or reality to them, and can even be independent of the physical world. And that's a big statement for someone in science to accept.
So when you do your session, which the Arcturian healing session is the one where that you created or you've really downloaded.
Mm-hmm.
Can you just give us a glimpse into what you're drawing upon, or what energies are you using?
Right. So the idea would be with various energy modalities, they're drawing from the ultimate sources from the divine or from the one source. And then a different energy modality would be like a prism, an aspect of the prism that is kind of unique. It kind of filters that divine energy. So the Arcturian healing is just like that. It's drawing from ultimately the divine energy source, which we come from,
right,
through this label or this dimension, spiritual dimension, called the Arcturian dimension. And that's anchored by the physical star, Arcturus, but it's really a spiritual dimension. So, and that was what filters the divine energy.
So when you do these sessions,
mm-hmm.
you mentioned it doesn't even necessarily have to come through you,
mm-hmm.
but you're opening yourself up to these healing frequencies.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Right?
Exactly. Mm-hmm.
Now, are you seeing results? I mean, I felt a shift in my energy.
Mm-hmm.
So what we're saying is you're able to harness or channel this energy, which is having a direct effect on the person you're working on.
Right.
So if someone's not having a session, how do we apply this to daily life?
Mm-hmm.
You talked about resonance. Can you talk about resonance a bit?
Right. Yeah. So there are a number of really important, interesting points that you brought up, and I'll just kind of start with one of them. Is that as a facilitator, and like you mentioned, I do also train others so that they can also be facilitators. It is more a presencing ultimately, like rather than the energy coming from the healer or the facilitator, or even through the facilitator. It just really comes right into the client's energy field. And then the facilitator is really turning it on and then watching or presencing it. And then the second point is what's unique from experience is that the energy has its own intelligence. You can direct it consciously, like to say, go to the liver or direct it to the foot if that person came in for like a broken leg. But if you just let the energy run, like for example, I had a session, I had no real prior history for the person, seemed to be running, and then all of a sudden it started running like on this woman's like left chest area. And I didn't want to say that it looked like it was clearing maybe something, I got the intuitive like breast cancer or something like that. And then, so I just let it run and I was describing it. Then later on, I told her like, I think it went on your left chest. And then she revealed like 20 years ago, she had a mastectomy on the left side.
Wow.
So the energy, and I didn't know that, and I just let the energy go where it needed to. So the energy has its own intelligence, and it's been I've seen that from experience.
So you see people shift.
Yeah.
There are healings that occur.
Yeah, exactly.
So if everything is about our energy and resonating,
mm-hmm.
how do we apply that to our lives?
Mm-hmm.
In other words, we don't want to resonate with something that's not in our best interest.
The thing I've noticed is that people are already very intuitive. They may not use this language, like this new language or terminology or lens, as I call it, of the energy healing modalities that are coming out. And some people are now adopting it because it is highly functional. But if you talk to anyone, they'll be able to kind of already immediately, you could have probe if they meet someone for the first time. They usually are pretty accurate if they trust what they've felt. That's the big point.
They can tune into it.
But yeah, exactly. A lot of it's just trusting what they know. And that's already in it. They picked up on the energy. They just won't use that language.
Right.
And so what the energy modalities are doing is giving a languaging and a lens for things that we already inherently do. Because once you have a language and a lens, then you can begin to really operate it. You can begin to delve deeper into those skills that are inherent. It's like you have a handle.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So just picking up on the word language,
mm-hmm.
you said in the workshop,
mm-hmm.
the words we use can either limit us or
mm-hmm.
expand our possibilities.
Right.
So we talked about someone mentioned about going to a doctor. Can you just give an
mm-hmm.
example of how the words can kind of, you talked about the wave,
mm-hmm.
so how the words can actually limit the possibilities.
Right. Yeah. So if you are, talking about concrete things, you may think that I need to be in your presence, your physical presence, to get a sense of who you are or to do any kind of communication. But many people, even though they may not trust it, they know sometimes they have these experiences where they're receiving information and not being in physical proximity to that person or thing. Like maybe you answer the phone and you are thinking of the person. So some people debunk that, but because maybe it doesn't fit a physical model. But there's been other experiences, like you'll have dreams that are precognitive, and it's very hard to explain that, meaning you'll dream about something and then it will happen soon. That's what I mean by precognitive. It's hard to explain that by physical reasons. So when you have the idea that things could be like vibrations,
right.
Vibrations don't have to necessarily be physically present for you to go into resonance with them. So you could be receiving the information, but in a non-physical way. And so the model opens up your capacity to see or recognize your experiences.
So it's like the 100th monkey. There's information fields,
mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
And then when it reaches a certain level,
mm-hmm.
then there can be a quantum leap.
Right.
Is that 100th monkey kind of a thing, or the Dalai Lama saying if everybody was conscious and prayed 10 minutes a day, that could shift the world
mm-hmm.
as we know it. So we're kind of walking around in this energetic soup
mm-hmm.
and maybe not realizing what we can contribute
mm-hmm.
to it or
mm-hmm.
how it's affecting us.
Right.
So, like you mentioned yesterday, that even a picture could affect our energy.
Mm-hmm.
So, can you just give us examples with the language we use and the way we live in ways that this energy is affecting our life and our planet?
Right. Well, most people know, basically, we're non-local broadcasters, meaning whatever you're thinking and feeling and of course doing, but even on the thinking, feeling level, you're always broadcasting that, almost like a broadcast tower. And non-local is a term that's been drawn from quantum physics to explain these more parapsychological phenomena or intuitive spiritual phenomena, meaning you don't need to be in the same local vicinity physically to be affected by these effects, these non-local effects. So what the Dalai Lama is saying is that you may be in a cave just meditating for 10 minutes, but your consciousness is accessible to other people who might not be around in that cave. So whatever you're thinking or doing has a global effect. You don't need to be physically present for them to feel that. And just as as an example, if you know someone and they're having a certain like talk or argument in a room and they leave, and you're another person, you come in and you're kind of sensitive to the vibrations. Without knowing what happened, you kind of feel uncomfortable in that room. You feel what's been left there. And on a positive note, if you had meditated in that room and kind of brought in a kind of calmness, when you leave and a person comes in, they're going to resonate and start to feel calm. So if your state of mind is always calm, you walk through the grocery store or the mall, you're healing all those people who will then come in and come to the same resonance that you had left there, in a sense.
So if someone has a higher resonance and they're walking into an area, let's say where someone had a fight, does that mean they automatically go down in their vibration to a lower vibration, or not necessarily?
Not necessarily. And that's really where the practice comes in, because it's really the strength of almost like a tuning fork. The one that's sort of vibrating the strongest. If there are two different ones, the strongest one can actually change the other tuning fork.
The light wins, they say.
Exactly.
And you also mentioned something about unconditional love, like that's the highest vibration. Would you say?
Yes. Yes. And how that works in kind of resonance interaction is when you think of someone, you basically are exchanging information on this non-physical level. So the issue, though, is that it's both positive as well as negative. So if you're in a resonance that's not based on love or is in kind of a negative cycle, you're still exchanging information, but it could be harmful for both people. And the key is, how do you break that?
How?
And that's exactly what you said, the unconditional love. One of the persons in that relationship or group needs to hold that sense of, it's okay, whatever is happening, it's part of the divine plan, it's part of the greater whole, and it might not understand it, but I'm going to accept it, I'm going to learn from it, and be open to seeing how it could help the other people. Even though it might emotionally not feel right at the time, or I don't feel great about it, I'm going to learn from it. And that type of attitude, that will already start to create a positive resonance to everyone in that group who's connecting to that person. So it shifts the entire dynamic.
So really, it's our personal responsibility, which we have to realize the incredible impact that we make, not only for ourselves, but for our people in our immediate world and the planet.
Exactly.
Really. So you said pictures could have a negative effect. Does that mean I don't watch the news because I'm very sensitive? What's your feeling about that? I mean, people need to know what's going on. What's your viewpoint on watching the news, which is a constant, showing all, sensationalism. It's showing all the negative things that are happening.
Right. So just back to like kind of stepwise what you mentioned, the pictures, why that's important is pictures are physical representations of what we've been referring to as informational fields, like that you can go into resonance with. These informational fields, it might be a theory right now, but it helps to explain what's the phenomena. But these informational fields, they're non-physical, they're not in space-time. But a picture could represent that informational field, like a picture of the Dalai Lama, or the picture might represent the informational field of Tibetan Buddhism, or of the Christ being might represent an informational field of Christianity. So you could use the picture, and when you just look at it, you actually are, your consciousness is already connecting to that informational field and actually downloading that information into your informational field.
Wow.
Yeah. And so it goes across the board, like you're mentioning, positive to negative to neutral events. So
do we not watch the news, or
what would be kind of my sense? Or
how do you feel about that?
I feel it's okay because it's, again, the strong tuning fork will win out over the weaker tuning fork. So the attitude is that, if, like, this is what Carolyn Missip said, which I find appropriate. Like, if it's not going to be you helping out things, who else will be out there? Like, if it's not the healers, if it's not the people who are, trying to help out, and we're avoiding all the different difficulties, and not really kind of getting out there and in there and kind of the mud,
right?
Then who is going to like go out and help, in a deep way? So that's why daily practice is very good, because you do need to keep a strong vibration that's positive, but then bring that vibration to those places that would need it, if that makes sense.
Well, not necessarily going into, a war zone, but even just if you have a daily practice, you're spreading it out in the world, and then taking it a step further from what Carolyn said, there are some people that can even then be more proactive.
Yeah, exactly. But, like what she was saying is even soldiers, or even people in the military, or even people who have been called to like war-torn areas, they could be a healing force. It's a state of consciousness. Like they could be actually healers, even though they never see anyone on the table per se, like in a healing room.
Right. Can we do distance in the class? We talked about sending energy out. There are tons of healers that do distance healing. Couldn't that also come into play, where we're doing that into areas that are experiencing trauma? Exactly.
Yeah. Like, I don't know if we can get into it here as a technique, but we did the double technique, where you're sending a sense of yourself to these places and as an informational field. And you could send doubles. That's actually part of the Arcturian healing method, on a more global level, rather than sending this intention or this double to do just a single healing for someone by distance. You could send it to like a war-torn area, just to help vibrationally.
I wonder what would happen if, like Deepak Chopra had a day where there were 100,000 people meditating. If we all meditated on, for example, what's going on, with ISIS now, or just to send all the love there.
Right.
So you're saying it's okay, but it's I guess that's why people that are experiencing a lot of struggle, if they go to church and they meditate on Jesus Christ, because he has such a high vibration, it will then bring their resonance up.
Exactly.
They'll feel better.
Exactly.
They feel more hopeful, because he's a beacon for that higher consciousness.
Exactly.
So somebody once told me to have little pictures or things all over that will just remind you, because our mind can take us down, a very wobbly path.
Right.
And then back to, that's the pictures, the words. It's I'm very unconscious. I have a friend of mine who has pointed out to me certain words that I say. And you even said in the class, even the words that we use can limit. Can you talk about the wave collapsing, or the infinite possibility? So if we label it, then we've immediately stopped the ability for that infinite possibility to occur.
Yeah. So what that concept is, and many different authors and speakers in the spiritual field currently who are using quantum concepts, and I use them as a metaphor to explain how to kind of tune your consciousness. The quantum idea is that a light particle, light, when you measure it, can either be seen as a wave or a particle. And before you measure it that way, it's the possibilities are infinitely open that it could be both a wave and a particle. But as soon as you create an experiment to see it either as a wave or a particle, it no longer can be the other thing. As soon as you observe it as a particle, it no longer is possible to be a wave. So, or if you set up an experiment to see it as a wave, it's no longer able to be seen as a particle, that particular light.
Well, so the label stops the ability to just be with it.
Yes.
It's like, or totally, it's like just to be with it instead of labeling it.
Exactly.
so then we limit ourselves. So for example, like an emotion,
Mm-hmm.
we'll feel an emotion and we'll seize up and we
Mhm.
label it.
Exactly.
And then it becomes kind of stuck.
Rigidified.
Rigidified.
Frozen.
And emotions are energy in motion. So if we don't label it
Mm-hmm.
and we're just with it,
Exactly.
there's more of a tendency that it's going to just flow.
Exactly. Keep it fluid.
To keep it fluid. So that means no labels.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of put the mind. We did a very interesting class last night with Jean. It was the, I honestly never thought that I could bend a fork or anything metal. And when you distracted us after showing us the technique, we were bending very, very hard forks.
Mm-hmm.
And the exciting part of the class was that most of us didn't realize the, I want to say not power, but the fact that we had this capacity that I don't think we realize the majesty of who we are.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's incredible.
Right, right.
So can you just talk a little bit about how the fork is the analogy for the energy?
Exactly. Well, in kind of what Barb was mentioning, or what you're mentioning, is in the class, you take a very hard piece of metal that's, you know that's it's very hard, you test it out. You do a technique that's really based on energy or these quantum consciousness ideas. And what it does is that at a certain point, it will soften the metal undeniably. And at that point, you can demonstrate that by twisting it or putting twirls in it, and then it hardens back up. That's the phenomenon.
Amazing. And, so there's like that little window.
Right.
And the second the mind went in, like I bent it halfway, and then I'm like, oh my God, look at me, and boom, it stopped.
Exactly. Yeah. You have to be in kind of like a Zen, open state of mind. It's not the mind that's the critical or the chatter mind that it's in there that's commenting. And that's fine, that's sometimes useful, but you have to kind of open to like your larger whole brain, almost like the intuitive, artistic side of your mind.
Right.
And then that's when this flows through, the phenomena presents itself, and you can, do it much easier.
Yeah, it was so great for me to see the excitement. These adults were like little kids realizing the potential.
Mm-hmm.
We're very kind of locked into a certain structure, paradigm, beliefs that keep us kind of, locked in.
Right. Yeah. And I think that's what the energy healing modalities or the energy model offers to like the modern person. I wouldn't want to throw away science or physics, and technology, and we're probably not going to give up our cell phones.
No, that's a whole separate issue with we can't see the EMFs, but they're there.
Right, but if you added an energy model to your existing developed scientific model, then you have the best of both worlds. You can open up capacities that you wouldn't look for in yourself.
I'm so glad you said that. So it's about the merging of the science of the East meets West without the ego, and then there's really unlimited potential there.
Yeah.
So Jean, what do you want to tell everyone? What's your message to people? I feel that this is the way we're going to heal, is realizing that we are energy and there's frequencies and we can resonate with different things. But what would you like everybody to know that's important, your passion right now for the world?
Yeah, I think if you go into healing or go into energy or integrate the healing model, there's like two main things. One is that there's a greater world than the physical, and that world is like a spiritual world, and it has consciousness, it has beings there. That's a big step. It kind of looks like it's going backwards to like 500,000 years ago, but that would be a very huge step when we open up to those other worlds. As a direct experience, not as a story someone told you to accept. And the second one is, as you go on this path of like the energy model, you realize kind of directly what maybe we learned in religion or ethics class, that it's not about you. Because the you who you think you are is actually a false sense. You're actually interconnected. It's almost like a us. And so, but it's a direct experience. And so it kind of becomes like almost like a no-brainer when you need to act with others. You're really just acting on yourself.
So we need to realize that we're all part of the whole. That we're not separate, which creates all the problems, which creates fear.
Right.
And you feel a daily practice of some kind is the most beneficial way to access that, or?
It's a very strong way to access it. So, some people, they feel good about a formal practice, even if it's short, like 5 minutes. Sort of keeps you on track.
Right.
Keeps you from, like you said, wandering down the slippery slope, the wobbly road. And other people feel that might actually like kind of turn them off. So they may already be doing it. They just need to recognize it. Like maybe they always take a walk.
Right.
And that's their meditation.
Right.
But without labeling it that.
Right. So we need to just get away from the labels.
Mm-hmm.
And how do you see the future of the work that you do in healing in the world?
Mm-hmm. Well, I like to focus more, on others now, on service in a sense. And that paradigm is much more revealing, much more penetrating, I think, and much more rewarding.
About service.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that what that does is it gets us out of the prison of me, which is really an uncomfortable place to be,
mm-hmm.
and to be able to serve is very liberating.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the work that you do is incredible. And again, I've been to Utensil 3 times, which is, I'm thrilled. And I look forward to working with you in the future and to see all of the work that you're going to be doing for the planet. So thank you so much for being here.
Oh, great.
Thank you.